Hello, welcome. Good afternoon. Hope you enjoyed your day. It's Sunday, 1st February, the first day of the month, and February is the month of love. It's interesting that the HR Digest is episode 156, and today we have a lovely guest who is actually my mother. And I can't wait to hear what she has to say. But she's an experienced woman and she has diverse knowledge about the topic that we are about to give you. My name is Winifred Yalsey. I'm an HR professional and an event host. The topic for today is building relationships that drive organizational success. And I'd like to welcome my co-host, George Jesse. George.
Hi, Winifred. Thanks for letting. Yeah, good afternoon.
How are you?
Hope you are enjoying your Sunday.
I am, but how are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Today's topic is
I am. I'm also good. Hope you are enjoying your Sunday.
Yes, I am. Today's topic is very interesting, and I can't wait to hear everything from the guests. So, could you introduce the guest for us? Okay. So the topic is building relationships. The topic
I'm really
is building
excited
relationships.
about this topic.
The topic is building relationships that drive organizational success. And to have here, I have Madam Millicent Clark, who is an author, founder, frontline consultant, HR thought leader, board member, an executive coach, member of ICF International Coaching Federation, shareholder of Legacy Girls College Ghana. I mean, this is something huge. And though she wasn't willing, she actually came just for us to listen to her experience and exposure. I'd like to welcome on board Madam Millicent Clark. Madam Millicent Clark, over to you.
Thank you so much, Winifred, for that lovely introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and yeah, happy Sunday. As Winifred said, today I want to reframe how we think about relationships at work. It's not, as soft skills, not as fuzzy, not as optional, but as the very infrastructure that determines whether, we execute well or struggle unnecessarily. And I'm referring to relationships that make a difference, that make work easier, faster, and more effective. And, I've been in the corporate world, I'm now retired for over 35 years. And throughout my career, I can say it's the relationships really that pulled me through, a lot of issues. It's not just about what you know, and it's about how, whom you know, etc. So today we'll look at, why relationships at work really matter more now than ever. What we mean by relationships at work, what do we mean by relationships at work? I think we'll spend some time looking at that. And we'll look at the ecosystem relating to relationship building. And we'll look at principles that also make relationships effective. I'll give you one or two practical behaviors that make a difference. And one thing I want us to look at, especially as HR professionals, is specifically at the political layer. How do we navigate, power centers and informal networks? And then I'll kind of leave you with a few tools and frameworks that we can use to turn some of these concepts into habits. And then I'll just challenge you to think of what you will do when you leave the session today in terms of how you're going to build effective relationships. So let's get into it. Now, why do relationships matter so much nowadays? You often hear people say organizations cannot succeed without its people, and that's so true. Because when relationships are weak, it shows in execution and it hampers the strategic delivery. And it's a well established fact that strong relationships equal faster decisions, fewer bottlenecks, and then higher accountability. And this for me is the performance infrastructure. And if I asked you, we all have examples of what it feels like when relationships are strong. Things move, decisions get made, problems get solved very quickly. And we also know what it feels like when relationships are strained. Everything takes longer. Communications get messy. And, small issues turn into big ones. Now, I just want us to draw from a very topical episode in Ghana right now. Those of us on social media, and because I'm retired, I can afford to be on social media a lot, are very aware of the saga relating to the deaths of our iconic musicians, Dada Lumba and Yal Sapon. A lot has been said, so much has happened. And the bottom line for me is that relationships have been strained. Communication has gotten messy, and small issues have actually turned into very big ones. And I sit back and I think things could have worked out differently if relationships were stronger and trust established. Now, if I bring this back to the organization setting, we operate in very high pressurized environments, high expectation environments. And as such, relationships determine the speed, they determine clarity. They determine whether we move as one organization or as disconnected parts. And they determine if the organization will be successful. So for me, this is why the topic really matters. I want us to just ground this into some data. There are about 63% of employees lose time due to poor communication. And this is according to Asana 2022 Anatomy of Work Index. 63%, much as 63% of employees lose time due to poor communication. Teams waste nearly a full workday a week on misalignment. And it's proven that strong collaboration boosts productivity, innovation, and execution. And trust, that big word, trust, reduces friction and accelerates delivery. And for us HR professionals, here's the truth. Most performance issues are not about skill. I can tell you that. They are about clarity, trust, and alignment. And when those break down, execution just slows. When they are strong, teams fly. So when we hear someone is a poor performer, let's have the patience to delve into this a little bit deeper, because that same person could join another team and flourish. So relationships really do matter. And poor communication and weak collaboration can cost the organization time, money, and momentum. So if we're saying teams lose nearly half a full a work day, every week, simply trying to navigate misalignment, that is not a people problem. For me, that's a systems problem, and relationships are part of that system. And when collaboration is strong, productivity rises, innovation rises, accountability rises, and trust rises. And trust reduces the friction. And friction, for me, is the silent tax on performance in any organization. So the data I have mentioned isn't about feelings, it's about performance drag. And when relationships are weak, we pay for it in time, rework and frustration. And when they are strong, execution accelerates. So this is the return on investment in building relationships. But what do we exactly mean by relationships in a business context? For me, it's not friendship, it's not informality, it's not bypassing hierarchy. Relationships in a business context equals trust plus clarity plus alignment plus influence. So I repeat, it's about trust, clarity, alignment, and influence. Relationships at work is not about just being best friends or hanging out after work for a drink or two. No, it's not the warm and fuzzy. We are talking about trust, clarity, alignment, and influence. That makes relationships. Clear communication, knowing how to work with people, even when you don't always agree. The ability for you to work across, functions without unnecessary tension. Ability to move decisions forward without political drag. Some people just disagree for the sake of disagreeing, just to show that they are powerful or just to take away somebody's shine. No. Relationship at work is about being someone who others can rely on, someone who communicates well, someone who does not create unnecessary friction. And it's not about flattering the hierarchy in the organization, no, because they're about strengthening the connective tissues that allows hierarchy to function. So let me just recap. Relationships are not about being close, they're about being aligned. They're about trust, clarity, and the ability to work through complexity without friction. And for us to be able to work through complexity, we need to understand the relationship ecosystem in an organization. Now, every one of us operates inside a relationship ecosystem. In our private lives, we have our parents, our siblings, our spouses, children, other family friends, making our relationship ecosystem. And in the workplace, we have the vertical relationships, we've got the horizontal relationships, and the strategic relationships. Now, the vertical relationships are made up of our senior leaders, the direct reports, and the matrix partners if you work in a matrix organization. And then the horizontal is your peers, the cross-functional teams, and the strategic relationships are the influencers, the gatekeepers, and the cultural carriers. And success depends on how well you navigate all three. That is the vertical, horizontal, and strategic relationships, not just one, or the ones that we naturally gravitate towards. I learned very early on in my career that, the personal assistant or the secretary to your boss is a strategic relationship that needs to be nurtured. They are the gatekeepers. And in many instances, they decide whether you can see the boss or not. When he's available, what he's up to, they know what is going on in the organization. And if you've built a good relationship with them, they can help you open doors. You get information quickly and you get heads up on issues, and they help you to manage some of the complexities in the organization. So don't frown upon some of these strategic relationships that are not obvious, but they can help you along. So how do we make relationships effective? I want us to look at a few principles in terms of how we can make relationships, effective. The first principle for me is credibility. Credibility is the currency, especially in hierarchical environments where people trust what you consistently deliver, not what you promise that you would deliver. And once credibility is established, trust becomes possible. So I worked for an organization that acquired another company, and I became the designated head of HR for them. I was very excited about this role because it was my first big role. And my role was to ensure that the new company was assimilated into the mother company. Now, there was a lot of suspicion from the new company. Firstly, to them, I had been planted there to report things to the head office. And secondly, there was a race barrier, there was a language barrier, and there was a cultural barrier. And I had to build credibility very quickly so that I could deliver on the HR agenda, because my bosses in head office were depending on me. And I also didn't want to fail. I wanted to make sure that I could deliver. And I targeted the CEO to build that credibility with, because for me, I knew once I had her on site, she will get the best or the rest of the exco on board. She was a very powerful and well respected CEO in her organization. And I did this by just ensuring we are aligned in whatever needed to be done. I would go to the office at 6:30 in the morning because she was an early bird. She was there by 6:30. And, I'll make sure that I work long hours because she worked long hours just to be with her. And I consistently delivered on my promise. I had to get out of my comfort zone, be present, and I cracked it. And I was able to deliver what head office wanted and implement the policies, practices, and the culture that needed the new organization needed to know. And for me, this led to trust. And trust is the second principle. Trust speeds up decision making. It reduces second guessing. It reduces oversight and micromanaging, and it reduces fear. So when trust is present at work, a lot of things move. In your personal lives, when you trust someone, you don't question their intentions. You inherently believe that they've done that, for good reason. In my last role as a leader as well, managing two complex regions, Africa and then Middle East, it was important for me to establish trust with my direct reports. They had big roles too. They were, responsible for clusters like West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, etc. And trusting in their abilities helped me in the work that I was doing. We will often have good debates and discussions. We will disagree on issues between ourselves and come up with compromises if necessary. But we were responsible for coming up with it. But they were responsible for coming up with the decisions that they were accountable for, and I didn't second guess that. Once the decision was made, I supported it. And when the decision turned out to be the wrong ones, there wasn't blame. I was more interested in what we had learned from the issue, and this builds a lot of trust. Knowing that someone has your back, I think that builds a lot of trust. The third is empathy. It's not the soft version. Empathy is understanding the pressures and the priorities and constraints that others are navigating, especially those above you, your bosses. When you understand the world of your boss, you become a more strategic partner because they are going through a lot. They are under pressure to make sure that they deliver. And then the fourth principle that drives relationships is reciprocity. Influence is earned through value. When people experience you as someone who makes their work easier, your voice carries more weight. I just want to ask you a question. Don't you love it when your boss or peers at a meeting say, Joe, what do you think? Or Joe, what is your opinion? Or they say to people, have you run this past Joe? Because they know that Joe is someone who adds value and therefore highlights this. So for me, it's really about, the influence and the value that you bring, to the work that you do. And then the fifth is alignment. Alignment is the antidote to confusion. Once you are aligned, confusion is out. When expectations are clear, relationships strengthen naturally. And this is why most organizations spend a lot of time at the beginning of the year doing strategic planning just to ensure that there's alignment. We are all working towards the same goals, and this strengthens our resolve to achieve these goals. Now, I just want us to just briefly turn these principles into some practical behaviors. And this is not grand gestures, no. It's really the small things like asking better questions, anticipating the needs of others, closing the loop, handling conflict early. If you show appreciation when someone helps out, that's a good behavior to have. For some people who like control, like me, if you give me updates before I ask for it, I'm happy. These are some behaviors that we should nurture. And these micro behaviors compound. People remember them. They offer options, not ultimatums. And then psychological safety is important in relationship building. because people feel safe when they know how you react. When accountability doesn't turn into blame, and when you give them structured ways to contribute, then they feel psychologically safe. And then the use of data, it takes away the emotion. It takes away the emotion and makes sure that the discussions move forward. And the behavior that I want to emphasize is being professional, being reliable, being respectful. Protect people's status. Don't surprise them in a meeting. Don't surprise them, and especially your bosses. I once witnessed, a banter between a CFO and a CEO in a virtual town hall meeting. The town hall meeting had 6,000 people online, and the CEO had, mentioned numbers that apparently were not quite accurate. The CFO sought to correct this in the session, but his tone and manner was disrespectful and condescending, leaving people with a feeling that the CEO didn't actually know his numbers. Now, you should have seen the look on the CEO's face, as if to say, "You are done." And indeed, that was the end of the relationship, leading to the CFO's resignation because trust had been broken. You showed me up, right? In a way that you shouldn't have. And both of them perhaps didn't feel like putting effort into repairing the relationship. So find a way to repair and strengthen relationships whilst respecting hierarchy. I think they both didn't know how to repair that relationship, and that relationship just went off. I want to touch briefly on the political layer. How do we navigate power centers and informal networks? And every organization has a formal structure and an informal one. Believe me, they do. And the informal network sometimes moves faster. Understanding it is not political, it is strategic. And how do you do this? You have to map real influence. There are people who have real influence in organizations. You've got to map it. You've got to try and build trust with gatekeepers. As I spoke about the gatekeeper being the personal assistant, you've got to build trust with them. You have to strengthen ties with connectors. You have to offer value before you need anything. And stay neutral in conflicts. There are people who make mistakes of aligning themselves so much to someone, and even if the person is doing wrong, they don't see it, they don't criticize, they don't say anything. And then the person leaves the organization, and then they are left bare and feeling very vulnerable. And I often hear people say, "I cannot stand politics of this place. I'm out." Well, hello. How about using the politics to your advantage? Because it is everywhere in different measures. Every organization has it in different measures. So if you use office politics to build relationships, that for me will drive organizational success. It doesn't mean manipulation or favoritism, playing games. No, it means understanding how influence and networks and human dynamics work inside an organization, and using that understanding ethically, to create trust, alignment, and collaboration. Let me just break it down a little bit. What I mean is in every workplace, people have different levels of influence, different access to information, different relationships and alliances, and different motivations and priorities. And office politics is just simply the informal system of how decisions get made and how people get things done beyond the formal organizational charts. You've got to use the office politics, and using it, what does it really mean? It means reading the room. You should understand the power dynamics and what's going on. You should understand it. You should not just be naive and just keep quiet. Read the room. You know who has influence and you know who influences whom. Navigating personalities with emotional intelligence. You've got to navigate that with emotional intelligence. And then building alliances based on trust, not manipulation. another story to tell. I learned a lot from one of my bosses. Really, I still keep in touch with her because she was superb. She was politically savvy. That's how I would call it. Very politically savvy, and she had a way of getting the most out of any situation. I remember asking her why she had included a second line report as part of our management committee, because that second line report had her boss in the management committee meeting. And she said, no, she's done that deliberately because the incumbent was the CEO of our biggest market, and she was very confident and questioning, and she operated at a higher level compared to her peers. And so, she said, instead of me wasting time trying to convince her and get her on board, I'd like her to be in the room so that she can discuss all her issues, she can disagree with us, and then when we make the decision, she's at least part of that decision making. And it really worked nicely. And I just sat down and thought, you know, this for me is really very clever because this is something that I wouldn't have, thought about. And sometimes I also pondered my naivety, during my early career days. I joined a new organization and I was tasked to develop a talent program for emerging talent. I had to work with a cross-functional team and I had assumed that everybody knew their roles and responsibilities, right? Therefore, things would just, come together nicely. If I sent you an email, you must respond and you must come back to me because this is what I needed to deliver my program. But no, delivery stalled because they all had other conflicting priorities, and I hadn't built a good enough relationship or a better enough relationship with them. I was new. I was so frustrated. And eventually I had to sit down and do what I call the stakeholder map to reveal the power dynamics, who has influence, who needs support, who requires careful management. And I also did a relationship audit to help me understand which relationships were fueling progress, which were neutral, and which were slowing me down that I really didn't need. And armed with all these answers, I was able to rethink my strategy and get those who mattered on board. And this is just a simple illustration of how relationships change outcomes. Like when alignment and trust were restored, execution just accelerated immediately. The work didn't change, by the way. It's the relationships, that did. So, when used positively, office politics can help you connect with key stakeholders, build your credibility, support colleagues, and then also create coalitions around shared goals and bridge, gaps between teams. So, my advice to you is that instead of avoiding politics, you use your awareness of them to strengthen relationships and not to exploit them. So what are some of the tools that you can use to build relationships at work? I mentioned a stakeholder map. It's just a visual way to identify who has a stake in your work, what they care about, and how much influence they hold. Think of it as a strategic snapshot of the people and groups who can affect or be affected by your work and your projects, and then you target these people and build their relationships. There's something also called the trust building checklist that you can use. It turns the abstract idea of building trust into specifics, into observable behaviors that you can practice. So a strong trust building checklist can often will have the following covered, like credibility. Do people believe in what you are doing? Reliability. Um, do you do what you really said you do? Transparency. Do people feel informed and included? And then some relationship signals. Do people feel respected and valued? So those are some of the things that you can check out. And then one of my personal best is a communication rhythm model. It ensures that information flows predictably, consistently, and internationally. So intentionally. So people know what to expect, when to expect it, and why it matters. I cannot downplay communication, communicate, and make sure that it's with impact and it's to the right, audience. And then the relationship audit that I also mentioned, which helps you understand which relationships bring you progress, which ones are neutral, and the ones that are slowing you down that you don't need to build. So look, there are a lot more tools, but these tools can help you to operate, everything that we've discussed and turn these concepts into habits. So what will you do tomorrow? If you left here, what will you do? For me, it's just pick one behavior to start, one relationship that you can strengthen, one conversation to initiate, and one habit, that you can build. Because change doesn't require a massive overhaul. It requires one intentional step at a time. And small steps will shift culture. And when relationships thrive, everything else gets easier. So let me close by saying, as I said, when relationships thrive, organizations accelerate. And strong relationships create high trust. High trust will also create high performance, and high performance will create organizational success. And relationships, remember, are not soft, they are structured, they are strategic, and they are the foundation of how we win. So that's the end of my presentation, Winifred. Back to
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much. I mean, it's really loaded. It's interesting, but I have a few questions for you. In your last corporate role, which relationship in your organization would you say was the most of your ability to perform well?
For me, the honest answer is the relationship with my direct manager. And I think it's because I think we all know this across industries and cultures, the manager employee relationship consistently has the strongest impact. It has the strongest impact because you need clarity of expectations. Um, how would you get resources? Access to resources is provided by your direct manager. Psychological safety, he's the one or she's the one that will provide that to you. The recognition and feedback comes from your direct manager, and then opportunity for growth as well, and your day-to-day motivation. My boss was great at amplifying all these and amplifying my performance, and this built my confidence a lot. So I would say that it's the person that most influenced my ability to perform, was my direct boss. But I think depending on the role and culture, there are other relationships that can be equally pivotal. So, for instance, cross-functional partners who control information and approvals, or workflow. If you have a good relationship with them, that helps your work along as well. And then mentors and sponsors who provide, visibility and political cover for you. You've got the relationship with peers and who collaborate, share knowledge, and then they help reduce some of the friction. And then, of course, the direct reports whose engagement and capability determine your success as well. So yeah, that is what I would say.
Yeah, I really appreciate your boss for what he did and the way he impacted your life. What relationship has helped you succeed the most in your career so far?
Yeah. I think I've answered this question so many times, and I say the same things over and over again. For me, it is the mentors and the sponsors in the organizations and even sometimes out of the organization that played a pivotal role in my career advancement. And my mentors guided me in my professional development. Every stage of my career, I had a mentor. And even in the final year of my career, when I was about to retire, I still had a mentor because I needed someone to help me to think through what I was going to do with my life after retirement. So for me, mentors and sponsors have really played a pivotal role. My sponsors provided me the visibility and the political cover. For someone to sponsor you, they really need you to show them that you have the capabilities and abilities and the potential to do the work, so they can advocate for you and open opportunities through their network. And I really benefited from this throughout my career. The other group of people that I would say are my direct reports. For me, their engagement and capability will determine your success. So if you have a capable, skilled, and efficient, workforce in terms of your direct reports, they make the work easier for you. You learn from them, as they do from you, because learning is continuous. You cannot say because you are the boss, you know everything. No, they will surprise you. It's like our children who surprise us sometimes and we think, oh, I've learned something from them. And for me, it's through continuous, learning from them that I think I evolved as a leader. And when they shine, I shine as well as a leader. And leadership, as I always say, is a privilege. And your role as a leader is to empower others to be successful, so that you, in turn, can be successful. The other relationship that I just want to mention is the power centers, the senior executives, the key gatekeepers, as I mentioned. They often carry disproportionate weight because they have access, right? They have access to the organization and the politics of the organization. And, as people would say, they know where the dead bodies are buried. They know how they can help you, to get along. They have alignments, they trust, and if you trust them, they can directly influence your execution. So for me, these relationships were really instrumental in my success during my career.
Okay, I'm interested in a follow-up question. How do you play with the politics in the organization? How did your bosses play with the politics and help you to defend you in cases where it was untrue, or whether it was true? How did the politics play for you, and how did your bosses help you?
So I think, when you are new to an organization or when you are climbing the organizational ladder, you think your work speaks for itself, right? So most of the time, people say, "Well, my work speaks for itself, and and that's it. I'm just going to do my work, put my head down." But what they did for me was to let me understand you've got to be visible. People need to understand who you are. I have this phrase that I say: if you want to score, go to the field and play. If they don't know you, how can your work speak for itself? You are not in the room when talent management discussions and succession plans are being discussed. So you've got to influence those people who can influence on your behalf. And for me, learning that very early on in my career just helped me. You have to learn to win the war and not just the fight. And there are certain things that you have to learn to say, I'm just going to leave it because it's not going to let me win the war, which is where your goal is to win big, right? So usually people will just be nitpicky, fighting about little things. You've got to see the bigger picture. And for me, that really helped, my career along, because I was able to read the room, taught to read the room and understand, what I needed to focus on and what I just could leave, because it didn't really matter.
Yeah. Again, I'd like to ask: were your bosses whilst the politics was going on, were your bosses able to fight for you and cover for you?
Yeah. They
How?
and that's the beauty of people who have your back, right? Because they want you to succeed, because they see it as, if you succeed, I have succeeded. So where there are things that they think, no, you're going to step in wrong, they will say, just sit back, leave it with me. I'm not the type of person that wanted to leave it with them because I want to be in it. But I think for them, if they find out that you're going to go and mess it up, they'll say, leave it with me. And then after they've gone and done what they need to do, they'll say, I need you to go and repair that relationship, or I need you to go and talk to them. And then they'll guide you in terms of how you could do that. So, and for me, that was really helpful, because you're always you always know there's somebody who you can go back to say it didn't work, and for the person to say, well, next time perhaps you could do it in another way, etc. So those for me were the ways that helped a lot in terms of the political atmosphere.
Yeah.
Where do relationships break down most often in an organization between leaders and managers and teams across departments?
Um, Look, I think relationships don't break down in just one place. They break down wherever alignment is missing, wherever there's miscommunication or there's no communication, where trust is weak. Then that's where, for me, relationships, break down. But having said that, I think for me, the most damaging breakdowns usually occur between the leaders and their subordinate managers, so their direct reports, the leaders and the direct reports. Um, for me, let me elaborate on what I mean. The breakdown between a leader and their subordinate manager is the most common, fracture points in top-down cultures. And most of our organizations are top-down cultures. A typical example of why the relationship will break down is a leader sets the direction, and then there's the expectation that the manager would go and execute. But sometimes the manager doesn't get the why. They don't get the why behind it, and they are supposed to just, execute. Sometimes managers feel pressure without support from the leader, and leading to, disengagement or quiet resistance, because they feel that they need to show that they can do it, and they're not asking enough questions of their leaders. And then there's a lot of resentment. And then sometimes communication is one way. The leader announces, and you, the manager, you just got to absorb. So there as well, there's, a gap. And sometimes, the leaders expect that the managers will translate whatever the strategy, etc., down into the organization, to the rest of the employees. And in the translation, I think they underestimate how much, is lost to that translation. So for me, the impact is just misalignment at this level, and it cascades down, creates so much confusion and inconsistency, and low trust in the organization.
I think this has been a very brilliant presentation. I've learned a lot. One thing that stood out for me, especially, was what you mentioned about relationships not being about friendship or being close to someone, because a lot of people get it wrong. And in the end, we don't achieve the organizational goals because we are a friend to someone and then we have made enemies all over the place. So I think this was a very brilliant take. My question is, okay, now the relationship has broken down totally. How do we go about repairing it? Because someone might be listening right now and they have a broken relationship with a boss, with a subordinate, someone that they report to, someone they have to see every day, someone they have to be in the office every minute. We spend like 8-9 hours every day in the office. So how do we go about repairing a broken relationship in the organization?
And I must add, when you see the person, then you go, oh my God, I'm confused. I don't want to see this person. I don't want to look their way.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think for me, look, repairing a relationship after a breakdown is one of the most powerful leadership skills that anybody at any level of the organization needs to have. And it's one of the least practiced, because sometimes you get into a bad relationship with somebody and then that's it. You stop talking to them. You just don't feel like dealing with them. If you have alternatives, you deal with that alternative and that's it. But I think for me, repairing a relationship has to be deliberate and a structured process, rather than just an emotional gamble. You can't just leave it to just emotional gamble. It has to be something that is really structured. and it is a leadership competency, not a personality trait. So anybody can repair a relationship if you know which structure to go through to try and repair the relationship. Firstly, you need to acknowledge that there's a breakdown. And that's where most people don't. They say, I've done nothing, she's done nothing. And meanwhile, there is a breakdown. First of all, you just need to acknowledge that there's a breakdown. And most relationships just stay broken because no one wants to name the issue and no one wants to own it to say there's a breakdown. And something in our dynamic isn't working. If you say to the person, listen, I noticed that something in our dynamic isn't working and I want us to fix it. Yeah. So that's a first step. And you've got to avoid blame, focus on the break. What is broken, not the person. And why this matters is that it signals maturity and accountability and a willingness to kind of reset. So you're not blaming the person, you're blaming the issue that we have. How do we deal with the issue? Then the second thing I would say is that you've got to understand, before you feel understood, understand from the person's perspective. Because for me, this is the turning point. Asking, how did my actions actually impact you? And try listening, without defending, without correcting, without explaining, because this is how I'm feeling, right? This is my side of the story. So try and listen, reflect back to what is being said, to show, some accuracy and respect, but not to answer. And why this really matters is that people repair faster when they feel that they've been heard. I told you why I was unhappy and you listened, so it makes it easier for us to repair. And then you've got to own your part in the relationship. I always tell people it takes two. There's no ways in any relationship that there's only one person at fault. Even how you reacted, makes it just um, um, not possible for just one person to be at fault. So you also fully own your parts in this. No excuses, no buts, no shared blame. Say something like, I see how my action, affected you, or my delay created frustration, etc. Or I didn't communicate clearly, and that affected your work. Because for me, taking accountability builds, the rebuilds the trust faster than the promises. And then you clarify expectations going forward. What do you need from me going forward? What do I need from you? What does success look like for us? And this then prevents repeats breakdowns because now you've clarified the expectations. Then you agree on the new behaviors. Going forward, how are we going to behave? We'll have more frequent check-ins. Be transparent about constraints, and then but rebuild for me is through consistency. So trust retains when you repeatedly do this. It's not just about the conversation and then that's done. You repeatedly, you just have to remind yourself that consistency is the proof of the repair. And then keep the door open. A repaired relationship still needs maintenance, right? So
Yes.
yeah, if something feels off again, go back and address it because it's that psychological safety and then prevents future breakdowns. So for me, that's really important.
I think I love that. So admittance, showing empathy, and then also accountability on your part, and then stating the way forward so that you are clear, you clarify expectations. And then this was going to lead to my last question, but I think you answered that with consistency. So I've done all these things. How do I see that our relationships are improving? Because this person still sees me every day and then they frown and my heart misses a beat and I'm like, oh, everything I have done is not really improving the relationship
Yeah, you see, it's little steps, right?
in what I'm supposed to do. And what happens if after doing all these things, the person is still at the other side? Do I just give up and then let it go, or how do I move forward?
Yeah, look, it depends. Sometimes you need this person so much that you would continue to ensure that there's repair in the relationship. It's like your spouse, right? You live together. You cannot be at loggerheads forever, right? And if they are angry, perhaps give them space, give them some time, and go back to the issue to say, I still think we really need to talk about this. You get what I'm saying? So you can't give up on relationships, especially relationships that are important to you, relationships that you need for your progress, relationships that you need for your career advancement, because you don't want to commit political suicide or career suicide as well, right? Where
Yeah.
you don't care about the relationship. Meanwhile, you're cutting your nose to spite your face. So for me, you would feel it when you think the relationship is getting better. Communication will become a bit more smoother, and there'll be reduced friction in the way you interact. There'll be more transparency. There are fewer surprises, and then feedback is flowing. So the person is starting to talk back to you, etc. Sometimes it takes time, but the emotional tone will improve over time, and the relationship feels less effortless. Then you know that it's getting better. And others who know that, for instance, the relationship is broken, they would see that there's repair going on here. Others will say, "Oh, I see that your relationship with so and so is getting better." That gives
Yeah.
you the opportunity to continue to get the relationship to where it should be.
Awesome. Thank you so much for pouring so much into us. I'm sure everyone who is on has heard something that is going to help them, especially the part about the practical steps to take to repair relationships that are broken already, and how to also maintain good working relationships with others. Hand over to Winifred to take over. Thank you.
Okay. Um, so that HR has a planning and conduct. So that HR has an effective planning and conducting effective training and development, which is a planning, conducting effective training and development, which is a 2-day training at Sadat's HR. The dates are 26th of February to 27th of February, and it's going to be between 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's going to take the whole day. The fee is 2,600, and we expect you to be there. That's if you are interested in this. It's very key as an HR person and as an HR professional. So I hope to get you there. We'll share it on our social media handles where you can register and be there. Now we have an HR conference, which is Sadat HR Conference 2026, which the theme is authentic employer branding, purpose, people, and public trust. It's happening on Thursday, 26th of March, which is in Western Serene Atlantic Hotel, not in Accra, but happening in Takrady. We have an in-person and virtual. In-person is about 1,600, virtual is about 1,300. So I hope to see you all there. Please follow us on our social media handles. And if you have any question, please you can let us know so that we reply, or just give us a call on the numbers over there where you see, then we'll get it to you. Now, I'd like to welcome the guests back. Lady Millicent,
This is the first time somebody has referred to me as Lady Millicent.
you are a lady. I've personally learned a lot. You've saved me 50 years of falling into the trap of an enemy. I mean, you've saved me. What if I have to re-listen again? But this is a whole masterpiece. No wonder you're an author and a coach. You've really, within an hour, you've given us what could take a whole management training or leadership skills to get to know. Thank you so much. I'd like to know your last words, and if you have any company or you have any training you'd like us to make known, please go ahead.
Yeah. So what I want to say is organizations need to be successful. They operate to make sure that they are in existence. And people make organizations. Relationships are important. And I believe that any relationship that has gone sour can be repaired. For the sake of the organization, the people in it, and for your own peace of mind, learn repair in terms of relationships. Because relationships are the heartbeat of every human being. You cannot live alone, you cannot live in silos. You've got to learn how to live with people, how to live in an ecosystem, how to live in your private lives, etc. And that will save you a lot of turmoil. So those are my last words. Now you want to know if I have any training, etc. I am enjoying my retirement. I have consultancy that I do like 1 gig a month or so. I'm so chilled about it. What I like doing is talk shows. I like joining organizations to talk about gender issues, diversity issues. So those are things that I do a lot of internationally and then within Ghana as well. I also do some consulting with an international organization, which is, I don't need to travel, etc. So that's I focus on, and then I do a lot of work with University of NUST. That's what it's called now, with the lecturers, helping them with a capability building, and that's something that I really enjoy. So yeah, you can get me when I'm free. I love to travel, so I'm always somewhere else. But yeah, that's what I do.
Okay.
I think,
Please, I'm sorry, we have some questions, so I need to ask
yeah.
you those questions. One is, how will you maneuver in a system where people don't care about what you do as long as it makes them gain favor with the CEO, even if it means they damage other people's image and credibility? And how do you manage such relationships?
This is where I would say the person needs a mentor and a sponsor. Because if you can't get to the CEO's level, right, and somebody else is damaging the relationship between you and the CEO, you need another voice to talk for you. You see, I think sometimes the problem with relationships is that we always think we are the only ones that can repair the relationship. You can repair the relationship through someone. So having a sponsor or a mentor, you go saying to them, listen, this is the issue that I'm facing, etc. And for that person to be your mouthpiece, for me, I find that the most effective way of getting the CEO or whoever to understand that there's more to you than what somebody else is saying. I find that
Okay.
more
Okay.
effective.
Okay, we need to wrap up in a minute, but there's another interesting follow-up question which says that it is very challenging if the toxic person is your boss. How do you handle such a situation where one feels he has done all that is possible to build relationship with your boss, but it's obvious your boss doesn't appreciate your effort?
And I think that a lot of times we don't approach the subject. We know that the boss is being like this to us and then we take it. I once had an issue like that. And I went to my boss's office, closed the door, and I said, what is it? He was taken aback because he did not expect it. Sometimes people bully, people challenge you because they know you will not try and find out the reason why the person is doing that. I think he was so surprised that we were able to repair the relationship because I came in, closed the door, and I said, what is it? What is it that you need from me? Can we talk? And I'm not leaving your office until we speak. And sometimes I think in relationships, we tolerate it. And the more you tolerate some of these things, it just perpetuates that kind of behavior.
Great. I think we have some glowing comments in there. Happy said, very interesting discussion. Solid points raised. Yazifa said, one of my most educative sessions. Kudos said that. And then, very educating from Cecilia Ameya. And then Atoko Aminami Sata also says, insightful and informative. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for joining us. We hope to bring more of this to you every Sunday. And thank you, Madam Millicent Clark, for sharing your well of wisdom with us. I'm sure every one of us have learned something that is going to transform how we build and manage our relationships at the workplace. Winifred.
Yeah. Thank you, Sedat Consulting,
You're
for
welcome,
inviting
madam.
me. Mm.
Viewers, I'm touched. I've learned a lot. This would have taken me a whole master's thesis to get to know, but I've gotten to know within 1 hour. That is why I expect you to listen to Sadat HR. And I'm happy to be your host. My name is Winifred Yause, Lady Winifred Yause, and my co-host, Joshua.
My name is Joshua Jesse. I'm HR professional. Thank you so much for joining us and hope to see you again very soon.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
Bye-bye.